and welcome to another Tuesday talk, but coming out on a Wednesday. So apologies guys that this is a little bit late. I had a lot of footage from Telford that I'm going through at the moment, and a lot of other stuff happening, obviously the first day at the shop and all of these things that really made the Tuesday talk difficult to get out yesterday, so apologies for that. A little bit late, but I still wanted to get this out to you. And what I want to talk about today is one of the big releases at Telford, and that is Airfix's new 109. Now, I had actually predicted that Airfix would release a 109 in this scale, and then I talked myself out of it and said that it would actually probably more likely be a Hurricane with all of the marketing and stuff that they were going on. But we have a 109. It's kind of a successor, I guess, replacement for the old vintage classic 124 scale 109. That was an E. Now we have a G, specifically G5/G6. And I want to show you the footage that I took of it at Telford, give you a kind of in-depth look through all of the box contents, and then give you a little bit of my take on it. So let's get to it. So here we have the box for the 109. It is the same size as the Spitfire, one of Airfix's standard boxes. I think it's a Series 17 kit. I may be wrong about that, but I think it's around that. And some people have mentioned a few things on this box art. I'm not going to speculate on that right. You then get into the Airfix display at Telford, which looks really nice. And this is the little rotating display. Obviously, Airfix had several of the 109s on display. This one had everything open, so you can see the wing pods, you can see the engine with all the cowlings open, and the cockpit as well. And it looks pretty nice. Now, apologies for the weird thing that's happening with the mirror there. I think it's a little bit of wobble on the rotation of the disc, and also my camera trying to compensate, not understanding what that is. But I don't think it detracts from the overall look of this aircraft, and it has to be said that these Airfix display models look really nice. So you can see this is a German scheme. We have all of the Daimler-Benz engine on display there. As I mentioned, those underwing gondolas with that extra armament in. So let's go back to the kit box itself and actually have a look inside. Opening it up, we can see we have got a pretty full box. So this is just like the Spitfire. Everything packed inside, it's filling that box. So the box itself is pretty sturdy. You can see it's corrugated card for that lower piece. The top cover is just a normal shiny card outer. But this looks like it's going to protect contents pretty well, and it's obviously packed to the brim. You can see we've got the instructions, which obviously have all of the schemes, the cartograph decals and things, and we'll come to that in due course. With all those instructions out of the way, you can see all of the bagged frames underneath. And here are those frames all laid out. Now it's interesting to note that these are all separately bagged. I think maybe a couple of them are double bagged. But you can see just laying it all out here, you can see the size of the box on the right here, these trestle tables, and you get a lot of plastic in the kit, which, we kind of expected, having had the 124 scale Spitfire, and this looks pretty good. So here are those instructions, complete with the engine on its engine mount. Some pretty nice art here. Getting into the instructions themselves, you can see we're straight into building that Daimler-Benz engine. And it's a very involved process. There are pages and pages of this engine assembly. Obviously you have two different options here. You can build the full engine if you want it exposed, and there is a cut down version if you want to put it all sealed up. Another thing I really like about these instructions, and that actually elevates it above the instructions that came with the Spitfire, are these detail pieces. Now you see you do have two different types of instrument panel. This actually goes through all of the different decal placement, but it also goes through all the colouring, and it got some really nice detailed pictures here of what the 109 cockpit looks like, And this is great if you don't have reference books. Airfix are giving you a lot here in terms of internal reference. Just to emphasize that, if we turn over, we have more pictures of lots of different options here. The engine in full detail from various different angles, again showing where to put various pieces and what to paint different components. Overall, these are some of the best instructions I think I've seen from Airfix, who, as we know, are pretty much at the top of the game here for instructions. Now, there are 5 schemes available in the box, and this gives an overview of all of those, and you've got some really nice detail pieces again for these cowlings. And again, Airfix have done some really nice things here. They've tracked one airframe through 3 iterations on the left here, much as they did with the original release of the Sea King, and then you have a further 2 German schemes on the right. So you've got plenty of variety here, some nice historical threads, and of course the aftermarket will probably supply us with a lot of options as well. Here you can see getting into the cockpit instructions, and it's very much like the Spitfire with the same sorts of level of detail of all the internal components. Just like the Spitfire as well, you have optional seat belts here, although I'm sure a lot of people will choose to replace these with aftermarket items. It's really nice that Airfix are including these pieces in this scale. As with most other Airfix instructions, you get callouts for different variants all the way through, and these are pretty clear, and here you can see just some examples here of some of the back armour differences. Now as we get to the wing assembly, that's also where all of the other components are put in, but we will skip those and come back to those a little bit later after we've gone through all of the instructions. So here you can see the wing assemblies seem fairly straightforward. We have a little bit of work to do with the undercarriage, but otherwise this is all standard stuff. Again, you get options to drill different holes depending on what you're going to attach to the wings, if anything. Likewise, assembly of all of the control surfaces at the rear is pretty standard, and it's interesting to see how Airfix have approached the tail section here, moulding as a separate piece that goes on top of the main fuselage. And again, I'll mention this a little bit later when it comes to different options in the future. The other thing I want to point out here are these pieces. Now, this I think really demonstrates some of the engineering thought that goes into these designs. So the 109 was renowned for having weak landing gear. That was one of the main flaws of the design all the way through its life. Models also tend to reflect that, and if anybody's built a 109 and you've put it down too hard on a surface or tried to take it to a model show, you'll know that repairs to the undercarriage are probably one of the most common things. Because it's really weak, it's a spindly undercarriage, it's outwards folding, it doesn't have a very strong structure. And Airfix have addressed this. Obviously a 1/24 scale kit is going to be big and heavy, so what they've actually done is moulded the tops of the undercarriage with part of the spar. Now that does 2 things. It gives you the correct angle for those undercarriage gear going out, and it also makes it a lot stronger. So again, this is one of those things where they're thinking about what's going to happen to the model after it's built, and I think this is top-notch design. So thank you, Airfix, this is great. We then go through all the various oil coolers and different flaps positions. Again, plenty of options here. And more control surfaces all the way through these pages. And then we come onto the front of the aircraft. And again, much as the top of the tail, this section here is moulded separately where you have the firewall and where the cowling goes on. Now, the main difference between the F, the various marks of G, and the K were primarily in the engine and the cowling around it and the armament carried. And for me, the way this kit is broken down really enables you to have different marks both of G and also potentially F and even K variants in the future. So I think this is really smart tooling by Airfix. Now as we're progressing on, we can see here are the underwing couplers and the over-engine machine gun mounts. And again, we're getting callouts here in full colour. These are really, really nice, and I think, again, this is top-notch by Airfix. This is some of the best in terms of instructions I've seen basically anywhere in the industry, and I really hope this carries on for other models that they bring out in the future. So coming on to the undercarriage again, here I mentioned those spar pieces, and the main undercarriage here is actually going onto those. We've got different options for the cowls and of course the rear tail wheel. The tyres also look pretty nice. We have weighted and non-weighted options, just like we did in the Spitfire, and I like the way that these are moulded in plastic and also have separate hubs, so these are going to be really easy to make, to paint, clean up, etc. So again, really top-notch. The other side of this page obviously deals with the add-ons, so we've got the centerline drop tank, and we have those underwing gondolas for those cannon. This continues onto the following page, and then we get onto the small items that we're adding on, like the optionally filtered air intake on the side. As we get into the final stages, then we're getting into things like the aerials, the props, and actually putting those assemblies onto the main airframe. Before we then start getting into things like all of the different transparency pieces. We also, of course, have the masking set, which we'll come to in a second, and the last page is going over exactly how that is masked and which different pieces for the canopy you need for the different versions. So here is that mask set. We'll see it again later, but I just wanted to show you as it comes in the kit. It's exactly the same as the other piece, and we'll see more of this as we get into the parts. We have a huge cartograph decal sheet which covers all of those different options, all of the common pieces, including all of the instrument dials. And again, this is perfectly in register, great colour density, really bright, vivid colours, and I'm sure being cartograph, it'll be absolutely superb to use. Then we get into the schemes themselves. So first of our schemes, the A scheme is of course the box art version. So this is actually a G6/Trop, so you do get the tropical and standard versions here, so the possibilities for other schemes are really quite good in this kit. But this one is the one that then in the B scheme, which we can see here, has taken over after being captured by the Americans. You can see the bright colours and the stars over the German insignia, and then as the RAF machine tested post-war. Our D scheme is a more traditional 74, 75, 76 scheme. And the final scheme, E scheme, has this nice mottle over the entire airframe, together with the yellow spinner identification bands and the blue band on the fuselage, makes it quite an unusual and quite colourful scheme. The final sheet goes to the placement of all the common decals. Again, this was common with the Spitfire too, and that rounds off our glossy sheets. Now, as I mentioned, Airfix had several of these 109s built up at their stand, and one of them was just done in bare plastic, which I think is always nice because it really shows the detail of the actual thing without kind of having the schemes kind of wow you, because what you're buying obviously is the kit. What you then do with it is your own. So seeing the nice glossy finish models is great, that shows what's possible, but the bare plastic really shows you, what's included. So I really like the inclusion of that. And the other thing here in the background is you can see they actually had a 3D printed Daimler-Benz engine, which I think got a lot of attention on the stand. A lot of people were asking about this and whether it was available for purchase, that they should. And I think absolutely Airfix could release a large-scale Daimler-Benz engine from this kit in the same way that they could with the Merlin engine from the Spitfire, and they would absolutely sell. Here we can see that overall display of all of the 6 aircraft they actually had built there, one of each of the schemes and the bare plastic. Here we have the A scheme, yellow 14, with all of its cowlings open and everything exposed to be viewed. Here's a close-up of the Daimler-Benz engine through that cowling on the other side. It looks really nice. Here's one of the kits made up as the B scheme, so yellow 14 in American possession. And then C scheme as the British aircraft, which always looks slightly odd, I think, having a 109 in British colours. Next up is D scheme, which I think is probably the weakest of all of the schemes included. Not that it still isn't gorgeous. And then finally the E scheme with that overall mottle and colourful banding. So let's have a look at the detail of some of the plastic then. Airfix obviously had some of these on display, but I also managed to get a look in the box contents, so I will show you some close-ups as well. Now these are just a selection of the frames, the main fuselage, the tops of the wings, the gondolas, the spinner, some of the undercarriage. You can see everything is laid out pretty well, and we'll see that further when we get into the detail pictures. So here we can see those undercarriage elements. So we have the two different types of wheels in different halves, and the different hubs there available separately to paint on the frame, as well as those wing spar undercarriage pieces that I mentioned before. Here you can see the blistered main wings and the fuselage. You can see the two different types of cowling, and again, the way that Airfix have handled it, I think they could easily do other variants whilst changing minimal parts in here. I like that the spinner and prop frame is all completely self-contained. And here we have those weapon gondolas. Here's just a close-up of the cannons included. This is the surface of the main wing. You can see pretty fine rivet detail embossed into the wing across its entire structure. And here you can see similar on the fuselage as well. This also quite nicely shows that fillet that allows different tail sections to be placed on top. Again, there's some really nice panel lining and engraving here. Here's one of the cowlings. Again, bulged for those larger machine guns, and with really nice panel line and rivet detail here. These are those main undercarriage wheels. And here we have a close-up of that really clever undercarriage piece. You can see the top of the undercarriage there moulded onto that spar. Nice strong joint, and then the rest of the undercarriage attaches to this in an overlapped fashion. So this, I think, is the single piece of engineering design in the kit that I think really shows the thought and attention to detail, and really demonstrates that Airfix is thinking about the modeler when they design these kits. So I think they really deserve kudos for this. And here you can see one of the control panels, showing just how detailed those bezels for the dials are. Even pieces like this for the framing and the cockpit have nice detail on. And as you can see, the transparencies are incredibly clear. Here's that masking set again. And Airfix also had a frame displayed with all of the masking included in the kit put onto those parts, which is really nice to be able to see how they go. It's also interesting to note here you have standard and Erler type cockpits in both closed and open formats, and 4 different varieties of the front armoured windscreen. They also had a frame displaying all of the additional masking set, which covers things like the stenciling as well as all the transparencies. So that's the Airfix 109. Now, in terms of my impressions of the kit, I think this is a really, really good kit. The engineering in it looks fantastic. The actual thought behind it, the attention to detail and the design. Again, I think the undercarriage piece really exemplifies it for me, but it's exhibited in other areas of the kit as well. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on this kit, because the 109 is a classic aircraft. People may moan and groan and say, oh no, not another 109, but more 109s were made than any other aircraft, in its various iterations. The G was a pretty substantial upgrade to the F in terms of armament. A lot of pilots didn't like it because it was heavier, but it was more heavily armed. It was designed as what they call Pulkzerstörer, a bomber formation destroyer in the main. And of course it had to keep up with developments that we were making in the Spitfire. So people who are moaning about the 109, this is a really solid choice. Not only from a modelling point of view, but also from a business point of view. So you'll know I like to put my business hat on a lot. And for me, 109 is a very solid choice in 1/24 scale for Airfix. A lot of people were suggesting some really wacky and far out things when it was announced that they were doing a 1/24 scale kit. Like fairly small fighter size aircraft in this scale is what works. It makes it manageable in terms of the build, in terms of cost. About that £100 price mark it's a pricey kit, but it's not, completely out there. It's not £300 where it's your once in a lifetime kind of investment. £100 is kind of a statement piece, but it's also not completely wild. So I think overall the balance of the design, the fact that they've gone for the G, which I think could easily be made for an F or a K variant in future if they wanted, or other G variants like the G10, for instance, was essentially a smoother cowling. I think it's smart. I think it's smart in a lot of ways, this release, and I hope that this is, Hornby empowering Airfix to make really good choices. The one tiny little fly in the ointment, which I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention, is that this kit is not being made in the same factory in the UK that the Spitfire was made in. It is going to be an Indian production kit. So that does mean, like the Gannet was an excellent kit, is an excellent kit, the engineering on it is phenomenal, but you are dealing with Indian QC. So let's fingers crossed that Airfix are keeping a tighter rein on them, especially entrusting them with a 1/24th scale. I think this will be the most expensive kit that's been produced in India to date. So let's just hope that they can get all of those pieces aligned, that they fix those QC issues, and we don't have a lot of returns, because on a big kit like this, a lot of returns, because there's a lot of frames, there's a lot of transparency in there, a lot of chances for things to go wrong. That could kill the profitability of the kit, and if it kills the profitability, it's not something they'll do again. Hornby will lose that faith. Hornby already trying to, put a lot of cost reduction. We've seen them close the US-America direct operation. I was going to talk a little bit about that because there have been some other videos out there, but I don't want to get into, that kind of mudslinging. They have closed their warehouse and US operation. Hornby Hobbies still has a registered entity there, but that you can register an entity in most countries quite easily. You'd have a physical presence. So again, I don't want to get into a whole thing with that, but cost cutting has been a big thing. Getting back to profitability, there's been a plan for that in Hornby. All of this hasn't come out of the blue, and I'm really looking forward to the Hornby 2025 financial reports, which should be coming out sometime in November. So let's hope that this is actually a return to, the Airfix of 2022 that we saw, and not some of the Hornby stuff that we've seen over the last couple of years. So I'm very encouraged by this release. I think if you're interested in the 109 or you want to do a big scale plane, this is the kit to get. I am going to be selling it in the shop. I'll put a link if you want to buy that. I haven't yet terminated my Hornby Hobbies account. I'm still kind of on the cusp, I would say. So they've done enough okay things recently to mean that I can maintain that, keep supplying Airfix kits, which I think is good. We just have to see how it goes in future. We'll play it by ear, as I judge people on actions rather than words. So let's see how that goes. So fingers crossed. It's a nice Christmas present. I'll talk a little bit about the other new kits that I saw at Telford, because there were quite a few. Nice Christmas presents for us all. A lot of those kits are coming out in the November, late November, early December timeframe. So it's going to be a strain on our wallets, I feel, this Christmas, because there's a lot of good stuff happening. And again, I think if anybody doubted the condition of the industry, of the model making as a hobby, you should go to Telford. You should see all of those new kits. You should see Zokamura with there from Japan, for instance. You don't do that if the hobby's dying. You don't invest in it. It costs thousands, right? So we're in a good place. The 109 is a good representation of that. Really good release from Airfix. Kudos to Dale, the designers, his team. It's a really nice looking kit, and I'm really looking forward to building it. Okay, well, that's all for me from this late Tuesday talk. Hopefully I'll see you later on the midweek model meet, where I'm going to be ploughing on with our little diorama and see how we get on with that. Okay, thanks for watching. See you soon.